I went to see a dramatic representation of gods having a bit of an argument called Thor Love and Thunder.
Right.
It was a movie in the part of the Marvel cinematic universe. Which
yes, you're quite fond of Captain Marvel, aren't you?
well, Captain Marvel is one of the characters. Marvel, the whole thing, yeah. Yeah, you're betraying your ignorance of the genre there.
Yes,
by saying Captain.
Yes.
This film was part of a series of films about Thor. Yeah, Thor is the god of thunder in these films.
Yes.
But also a superhero. That's his super ability, doing magical things with a flying hammer.
Thor being a Norse god?
He's a Norse god. Now, in this film, Thor Love and Thunder, the gods, Norse and Greek, and other gods that have been believed in over the years are referred to, and in fact you see quite a few of them. Now, there's a sort of an assumption which I've come across a lot in science fiction and fantasy literature, but it was also an assumption at the time of Jesus, that each nation has its own god. It's not that they're not real, they're real gods, but they're only for that nation.
Right.
Now, the great comedy science fiction and fantasy author Terry Pratchett developed almost like a system of belief, not that he believed it, but for within the world that he created, which the gods did exist as long as they had enough followers. So they had less followers, the gods became weaker, and they're more followers. They became more powerful, and in the Terry Pratchett, and they could do lots of smiting and stamping on people.
Yes,
that's in his book, Small Gods.
Who were the prominent gods in Jesus' time? I would say Baal.
Well, there was certainly a bull-type god. They would kill a bull, an animal, and have blood drenching on the altar, and so it was often confused with what the Christians did. And what the Christians did was, of course, drink wine and pretend it was the blood of Jesus, which
right.
And so there was a confusion there. But the cult of worshipping Caesar was very popular.
Yes.
There was Aphrodite, is the Greek name.
Yes.
Was very popular. Diana, isn't it?
Diana of the Ephesians.
Yeah. Yes. They're equivalent in the two. Lots of gods. Was very popular.
A huntress.
Yeah. There's lots of these different gods. Now, some of them are taken into the story of Thor. Now, Thor, as you say, is a Norse god, so it came along later as one of the gods, I think. Which certainly the stories we have a bit later. And he was the god of thunder, so he had a hammer like a blacksmith with a hammer. Striking on his anvil would produce a bang and then sparks.
Yes.
And so it was like a creative imagery of what might be producing the thunder and the lightning.
Yep.
But in our story here, he wears a Viking helmet quite a lot, and he carries a hammer around which enables him to fly, because he throws the hammer and then grabs hold of it, and it enables him to fly. It's all rather silly, but as long as you take the story seriously, within the story it can all make sense. Now, Thor Love and Thunder is, however, a comedy, as well as being a fantasy, science fiction / superhero movie. And so lots of jokes made at Thor's expense. But the basic plot, I just want to say to you, because then I'll put it to you, Beryl, what do you think of this, of their view of God or gods? Now, of course, the difference with Christianity is there's lots of gods. I recognise that that's an issue.
Yes.
But if we take that away, this is what happens. The villain of the piece is Gore, the God Butcher. And right at the start of the film, he prays to his god.
Which you would if you had no other...
Yeah, no, there was a famine on the land, and he's out in the desert, it's too hot. And he is with his daughter, and that's all that's left is his young daughter, who's maybe 8. No, I think about 8. And she dies, presumably, she's dehydrated, and she dies, even though he's been praying. And at that point, he looks up and he sees an oasis in the desert. And he goes over there, and in the oasis is his god, celebrating something. The god is celebrating the fact that he's killed someone who had this sword that can kill gods.
Right.
And he's defeated, he's killed this person, but the sword is there. And Gore, the god, becomes known as the God Butcher. He sees that this god has heard his prayers and let his daughter die.
Yeah.
So he kills the god with the sword and decides to kill all gods. Anyway, that's the starts the story, and of course we see lots of other gods, and I won't bore you with all of it, but when we get to the very end of the story, Gore the God Butcher, so spoilers, I'm telling you the end of the story now. If you don't want to hear this, just,
turn the volume down.
No. Pause it here, go and watch the film, and come back. Go to Disney Plus later, you'll be able to watch it, but then come back and listen to what I have to say. Watch the end, and then tell me if you agree with this. At the end, Beryl, this is what happens. Gore the God Butcher has gone to an entity called Eternity,
right,
who is like an even more powerful god. But he goes to this entity to ask that it would destroy all gods, because when you believe in them, they let you down. So he wants to kill them all. They shouldn't have that power. So he goes to Eternity, and you can make one request, and his request is, destroy all gods. But just before he goes there, Thor, by this point there's two Thors, because he's got a girlfriend who becomes Thor as well. Anyway, that's complication. But Thor says, no, that's not what you want. You don't want revenge. You want your daughter.
Yeah.
Ask for her to be given life. And then he, for various reasons, he sees that Thor is genuine and how Thor is a good, loving man, as well as a god. You have to have seen the whole plot to see that he would see that in him. And so he does that. He brings back the daughter and gives her to Thor to look after, because he then dies. Gorr is dying. So this is what he does. He sacrifices himself and all of his ambitions, Gorr, in order to save his daughter's life. He was an evil villain when he wouldn't trust in gods and wanted gods to be dead. As soon as he believed in God, in fact, only one God, Thor, because he was a good god, that changed his perspective. So he was evil when he didn't believe in gods. When he believed in God and trusted him, he became good and gave life to his daughter. And then Thor is faithful and just and takes the daughter and goes off and has superhero adventures with her. But that's the start of the next film, I guess. Isn't that interesting that should be the case?
Yes. Yes, it's certain aspects.
Yes, go on.
I think we can think of God like that. When we lose people, such as like in the last couple of years, people have lost loved ones because of coronavirus.
Yes.
I wonder what their attitude was towards God.
Yes.
The God that Christians believe in. In fact, the only real God.
The problem with me talking about Thor, which is a made-up film, I know, but it uses gods that people used to believe in. There is actually only one God. I know it doesn't work. There's only the one bit of it that works, is that when you don't believe in God, then it makes you a bad person. And also, when you trust in God, you are able to give life to others. If you trust in God and you entrust your children and their future to God, that's the best possible future.
Yeah, it's amazing that should happen, but it does work. Yeah. I can testify to it.
Now, let me ask you this, Beryl, this as we're talking about this, because the problem for Gorr the God Butcher was that he prayed to the gods who were just living it up and ignoring them and getting drunk and having orgies. That's the tenor of the film. The reason the gods aren't listening is because they don't care, to be honest. So a lot like the gods of the Norse and Greek legend.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I don't believe in those gods, and he therefore distrusts them.
Is faith then just a product of your own imagination?
That's what some people believe. That is not what they were saying there. They say, the gods, we're saying there's only one God. So say God exists, but he doesn't seem to care. That's the claim here. Obviously, I don't think he's a product of your own imagination, but in this film, it's not like that either. Now, just take it to the situation you said, someone loses a loved one. They've died even though they've prayed. These days, and I think this is more common, it's a modern problem, a modern way of thinking, from the 18th century onwards, we've had this development of modern thought, which believes in the rationality of humans being able to assess a situation. So you decide whether or not God's good enough for you, almost. You're able to assess whether he's good. Now, bringing that to your situation, if God didn't answer your prayer, someone you love dies, even though if you prayed for them to be brought back to life or to be saved from this death. I come across a lot of people say, of course, therefore I lost my faith. I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't get the connection. Because what you're saying, if you just think for a moment what you're saying is, because God didn't answer my prayer, he must be wrong. It seems to be very arrogant.
It's putting that person who you've lost as being more preeminent than God.
Yes.
Basically.
And that's because you love them.
Yeah, that's not wrong to love them.
No, it's not at all. But if they're dead and they had faith, they're certainly in a better place. So maybe you're being a bit selfish, but which is understandable in that situation. I'm not saying that I'm not like that the same, but what I don't do, and what I think is a mistake, is to then blame God for it, or to think that God doesn't exist. Therefore, he doesn't exist, or in Gorr, the God Butcher's case, therefore I'm going to kill him. But taking that in today's situation, they effectively do kill him, and then they say he doesn't exist because he didn't save whoever. That makes no sense, because God could exist, but be actually very unpleasant.
Yeah.
So it's nothing to do with his existence or not. But then you say, well, is he good? Well, the belief in the Christian God starts with the idea of suffering.
Yes.
I mean, Jesus, the Son of God, suffered the most hideous death and died. So knowing the central belief of the Christian faith, how does someone suffering and dying mean you don't believe anymore? It just seems the weirdest thing to me. Of all the faiths to stop believing for the Christian faith, which has the actual founder of the faith suffering and dying hideously. Okay, just think about it logically. Why would that mean someone you know suffering and dying means you don't believe anymore?
Yes.
Where's the logic?
But it's not logical,
No,
is it?
no, there is. Well, it's
And
an
that's what
emotional
faith
response.
is all about. Faith is trusting in God even when you can't understand.
This is the vital point you've got there, Beryl. That's exactly right. Faith is not emotion. Faith is being rational. Faith is a rational belief in God. You have reasons to believe in him, and the fact that you're sad, upset, whatever about something shouldn't affect that.
No.
So there we are. Thor embarked on a journey. He starts looking for inner peace, but in fact in the end he finds meaning. And at the end of the film, again spoilers, at the end of the film he does find meaning. The woman who he loves dies, but he finds meaning through bringing up this girl as his daughter of his enemy. He finds meaning as being a loving father to a child, and therefore bringing her up, in fact, in the ways of Thor. He even gives her a hammer. Isn't that the most conservative message in a film you've ever heard?
Yes, absolutely.
From a Disney film. I think the critics of it, who are critics from the more conservative people, I think they've missed it. I think they haven't seen what the film's about. The film promotes faith in God, well, gods in this case, but only one God. Thor's the only good God in this, really. And the aim for the future, your purpose, is to be a loving parent to the next generation. What? Isn't that a great message to have?
Yes.
So there we are. There's Thor defeated Gore the God Butcher, not by might, not by power, but by his spirit, by his good spirit. What a great message.